If there's something that I really like, it's taking something traditional and adapting it to work in a modern world. Such as this, my turntable. Now, I enjoy listening to my vinyl record collection, but I also like listening to it through my Sonos speakers. So my record player has Bluetooth, which means that I can control it via an app to listen to my music throughout the house on all of my Sonos speakers. Traditional meets modernity. Which is why this car intrigues me so much, because it's a fairly old model now. And it's from quite a traditional brand, Jeep. So you would think that it has a large capacity turbo diesel engine driving all four wheels through lots of ironwork and metal stuff going on underneath. But no, because up front is a small capacity turbocharged petrol engine mated to an electric motor to give it all-wheel drive. In other words, it's a plug-in hybrid. The Renegade has been modernised. Which begs the question, is it still relevant? Or is it a bit of a relic? Time to find out as I say welcome to this week's road test review. Welcome to the Jeep Renegade 4xe North Star. Please sit yourself down, make yourself comfortable in the house of cars. Now, I've got a little bit of a confession to make to you. I wasn't supposed to be reviewing this car. You see, the car I'm supposed to be reviewing is the Jeep Avenger 4xe. And whilst I was typing the email out to the Jeep press department asking to book one in, I wasn't really concentrating hard enough and I typed Renegade for some reason. And when the confirmation came back through saying, yep, no problem at all, here's a Renegade for you on these dates, I thought, oh, hang on a second. But I stopped myself. Rather than cancel it, I started to have a little think. Because here's the thing, I'm a Jeep owner. I've got a Grand Cherokee, it's my second one, it's our family wagon. The thing about them is, I love them, but they are quite old-fashioned. They're not really quite a modern brand in some respects when you look at some of their cars, such as our Grand Cherokee. And the Renegade, well, it's been out 10 years now. I mean, it should be due for retirement, especially with the new Avenger out, which is, by the way, coming tomorrow to replace this, so I will be reviewing that car. But I thought to myself, why have they updated it? Why have they stuck a hybrid drivetrain in it? So rather than cancel it, I thought, let's get it in, let's put it through a review and find out actually whether or not this has worked, whether or not there's a bit of a Renegade renaissance by making it a hybrid. A little bit like vinyl records. Now, before we get on with the road test review, could I just ask you just to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and obviously like the video once you've watched it if you do enjoy it, and leave your comments and your thoughts down below. If you've got one of these, let me know what you think about it after we've finished the road test review. Okay? Right. Let's crack on and let's find out if the Renegade is still relevant. But as always, before we start the main review, let's take a look at the main bullet points of the Jeep Renegade 4xe before we start. So having gone on sale in 2014, the Renegade shared its underpinnings with the Fiat 500X and was the first ever Jeep to be built outside the USA at the Fiat plant in Italy. Having originally been available with both petrol and diesel engines, the Renegade is now petrol only, but also features electrification in the form of a hybrid, or as we have here, a plug-in hybrid. Power varies between 130 horsepower for the front-wheel drive e-hybrid or 240 horsepower for this all-wheel drive 4xe plug-in hybrid. The range has been simplified to just two trim levels, either the North Star we have here on test or a range-topping Summit. And prices did range from just under £33,000 to just under £39,000 depending on model and drivetrain before options are fitted. So it's not exactly a cheap car, but it has been a big seller for Jeep. But my question is it still worth it in 2025? And has Jeep managed to inject some modernity into what is now its oldest model? Well, let's put it through a House of Cars road test review and find out. Oh, hang on a second, Brian, you've made a bit of a boo-boo there, because you said the Renegade was Jeep's oldest model. Surely you've not forgotten about the Wrangler. Here's the thing, believe it or not, this is actually older than the Wrangler, because the Wrangler is a little bit like the Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. Jeep did a completely new model. It might look like the original old Wrangler, but it's a much more modern car than that. And oddly enough, the Wrangler was the first car actually reviewed on House of Cars. So if you want to have a look at that video, have a little look there, because that's a great car. But the Renegade is actually older than the Wrangler, believe it or not, or as it stands at the moment. And here's the other confusing thing. As I say, it came out in 2014 and it sat on the same platform as the Fiat 500X, because FCA, as it was at the time, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, obviously own Fiat and Jeep. But the 500X has been replaced now with the 600, the Fiat 600, which sits on the same platform as the Jeep Avenger, which is the smaller car to this. And if that isn't complicated enough, the size of this is quite weird, because the Avenger is a proper B segment crossover, that small crossover section. But this isn't a C segment crossover, because this is actually smaller than the Compass, which is Jeep's C segment crossover, which is about to be replaced by a new Compass, which is bigger. I told you it all got a bit confusing. Anyway, look, back to the styling of it, okay? What do we think? I quite like it. There's one thing it's not, is particularly modern looking, but it does look like a Jeep, and that's why I like it. I liked it when it first came out. It's quite a roughy-tufty looking little car, which is what I think a Jeep should look like. So of course you've got all the traditional Jeep styling cues, such as your 7-slot grille across the front, your Wrangler-esque headlights, you know, pushed right out to either side of the grille, your big Jeep badge across the leading edge of the bonnet, which has been blacked out now on this sort of like North Star edition as well. And you get nice little Easter eggs around the car as well, such as the sensor for the radar guided cruise control has got the little logo of the Wrangler, the original Jeep, in fact no, the Willys Jeep, embedded into it there. It got a little bit of a facelift a few years back, and this is also the car that we're looking at today. So it got new sort of like headlight technology, got reprofiled front bumpers as well. Now, when they brought the 4xe out, and that's how you pronounce it, although it looks 4xe, it's actually pronounced 4xe. In other words, 4x4, but electrified, if that makes sense. They did have a Trailhawk edition, which was the proper off-road one, you know, that had a slightly different, didn't have such a deep front bumper here, so for a better approach angle and things like that. They've done away with that now, so there's now just the two models, the North Star, which this one is, or the Summit, which is a more sort of like luxurious variant. You don't get that more off-road version of it, and I'm a bit surprised at that, because I think that might have been the thing for Jeep to have done. If they're going to sort of like slim down the Renegade and keep it going, why not go a little bit more niche and off-roadish and keep the Trailhawk? But they haven't. Anyway, there we go. As I say, it's quite a nice looking car, especially in this techno green colour, which this car is, this dark metallic green. Silly name for it, techno green, but never mind, it's called techno green. But this one also has the black roof, which is an option as well. But it looks really good. You've got this matte black sort of like decal in the centre of the bonnet here. Now, the Avenger that I'm getting tomorrow to replace it is the North Face. You know, the twinned with that outdoor clothing brand, and it has the same, and Jeep say this is to stop reflections going onto the windscreen. You know, if you're off-road with the car and you get the sun on it, you don't want a reflection from the bonnet into your eyes when you're trying to place the car off-road. That's why they do this matte sort of decal on the bonnet. But it's much narrower than you get in the Avenger, so I don't know how much use that will be if you're actually off-roading, but never mind, that's what it's got there. And of course you've got this fairly open scuttle panel here, sort of like with the big exposed wipers on it, but there's lots of little Easter eggs around the car. As I say, you've got that little Jeep, Willys Jeep logo on the front there. There's also another one up there on the windscreen as well, and there's loads more around the car, and lots of little design touches that Jeep have managed to sort of like put into it, which I really do like. But yeah, as I say, it's the familiar Renegade that we've known now for about 10 years, so there's not really an awful lot new to talk to you about. But it'd be a short video if we stopped there, which some of you might actually appreciate, but I'm going to carry on talking. So, 17-inch alloy wheels on the North Star, 18s on the Summit. They're all this gloss black finish as well, so you've got to put up with that. Of course, you get the North Star badge on the sort of like the scuttle panel there. Nice big plastic wheel arch extensions. Of course, you've got that squared off wheel arch, which is again that sort of like box shaped wheel arch, which is a very traditional Jeep styling thing as well. And as I say, there's lots of different styling cues when you move around the car as well. Big chunky door mirrors as well. Now the one thing about it is it's quite slab sided in terms of that, which is a good thing when you're driving the car both on and off the road, which I'll talk about a bit later. 4.2 meters long, this car. So again, if you're thinking about size of it, it's very similar to things such as the Renault Capture, maybe the Nissan Juke, but it's much more upright and boxier than both of those cars, and you can really see that in the shape, and that lends itself relatively well to interior accommodation. You also get these standard integrated roof rails, which are load bearing as well. Jeep has a partnership with Tent Box, you know, the roof tent people, you know, that obviously seems like quite popular these days. So you can mount something up on there if you are one of those outdoorsy type of people that the sort of the Renegade is aimed at. So that's good as well. And again, chunky big things such as door handles. But of course, you've got things such as, you know, sort of like locking from the door handle. Sorry, it does that as soon as I touch the handle because it thinks I'm going to lock it. Really nice big upright windows as well, which is great for keeping the cabin feeling really airy. But you've got quite a decent ride height there as well. So as I say, in terms of its ability off-road, it's not compromised, maybe a little bit by that, as I say, front air dam at the front. But you've got a relatively short overhang at the back, which is great for sort of your departure angle. And as I say, look how upright the rear end of it is, you know, again, which is brilliant for placing it both on and off-road. See what I mean about that really boxy back end to it? Really easy to park the car, but it's even easier because you've got a reverse camera there, plus obviously you've got parking sensors across the back bumper as well. One thing I love about the Renegade when it first came out was these rear lights, because as you can see, they've almost got that sort of like X motif in them, which is designed to mimic the X that you get, the cross hatch you get on a jerry can. I love that, and again, you can see that round the car. They've really integrated that sort of design cue into lots of areas of the car, and I really do like it. Again, you get the blacked out Jeep badge, obviously just to make it a little bit more modern. Privacy glasses around the car as well, as you'd expect. Your 4xe badge on the back, and of course I didn't mention, but you got a filler on that side, sorry, well a plug if you like, on the near side for your electric charging, and then your petrol flap is round on the other side, on the off side as well. Big tough plastic bumper at the back, which makes it nice and practical if you're reversing up to something, or as I say, if you're using off-road as well. And you can tow with the car as well, but not as much as you might think. And we'll go on to that in the practicality section. Look, we don't need to talk too much about it. It's a Jeep Renegade. It hasn't really changed that much over the last 10 years. But you know what? I quite like it. I think it's quite a little roughy-tufty. I know I'm a Jeep driver and I am a bit of a Jeep fan, but I do like the Renegade, I always have. I think it's a good looking little car. And I think, you know, in this sort of dark metallic green, I think it really looks quite smart. But it certainly doesn't look as modern maybe as some of its rivals. And it certainly doesn't look as modern as the new Avenger, which I think is a great looking little car. Spoiler alert for that review. But what do you think? Do you like it? Do you have one? I mean, there must be loads of you out there that've got a Renegade. Did you buy it mainly because of how it looked? Do you like the way that Jeep kept that sort of traditional look to the car? Or are you looking on your driveway now thinking, oh, that's looking a little bit, you know, it's looking a bit pensionable now. Maybe we should think about changing it. Whatever it is, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Now, practicality. Well, as I say, we've got a Grand Cherokee and it does our family holidays to Cornwall in France every year, and it's very practical indeed. This isn't quite so big, obviously, because it is a smaller car, and it's reduced even further by being the plug-in hybrid. So that is 330 litres that you get with this car. To be fair, however, if you go for the standard hybrid, it only adds an extra 20 litres onto it, so it's not a massive difference in that sense. If you fold down the 60-40 split rear seat, that will take total capacity up to 1,277 litres on the plug-in hybrid, 1,297 litres, obviously, on the normal hybrid. Now, does it take suitcases? Well, yes it does, but maybe not as many as some of its rivals. However, there's our large one. If you put it in up against the back seat like that, you can then get the medium one along the front there like that, and then there is space down the side there for a carry-on. Okay, so that is your luggage capacity. There's not really any underfloor storage. Well, there is a little bit, but that's for the cables, because this is the plug-in hybrid. And you can drop the boot floor down, but of course it's just a small section of the boot in the middle of the actual floor, so it doesn't create a much lower floor to accommodate the suitcases, if that makes sense. Still, as I say, remember, those roof rails are load bearing, so if you want a roof box, you can certainly put a roof box on it to help increase luggage capacity. Now, I also mentioned you can tow with the car, and you can, but on the plug-in hybrid, you can only tow a brake trailer up to about 1,140 kilos. If you go for the standard hybrid, that ups that to just over 1,400 kilos of a brake trailer you can tow. So again, there's a little bit added practicality for that, but certainly, again, if you're just using a small trailer for taking garden waste to the tip, tip or whatever, you can certainly do it with the Renegade. So rear accommodation, well, there's a couple of things about it that I quite like. Because it's that nice boxy shape, the doors are very square. Do you know what I mean? There's no real angle here to sort of get in through. So again, if you're loading child seats or just children into the back, it's nice and straightforward. Or dare I suggest for elderly people, you know, there's nothing to really climb over in that sense, which is very, very good. And the doors do drop a relatively decent size. And actually, the rear accommodation isn't bad. The other nice thing is the door opens literally at right angles to the body. So that is really good. It's a good wide opening door, although the aperture itself is quite small in terms of the width of the aperture, but you've got a nice square aperture to get in and out of, and as I say, the door opens wide enough. So that's quite good. Rear space. It's good for the size of car again. You know, when you think about it, as I say, 4.2 metres long. That's my driving position. And I'm average height, I'm 5'8". And I can sit behind myself, and I have got knee room, and I have got plenty of foot room as well underneath here, and I can wiggle my feet around underneath the seat, and that's it in its lowest position. The other nice thing is it doesn't feel particularly claustrophobic in here either. So although it's a dark interior on this car, you get the light headlining. Plus this car also has an opening glass panoramic roof, which has actually got the blind in place at the moment. So when that's open, it floods more light in, but it's a cloth one that's slightly perforated. So even when it is closed, it lets light in. So it's good. It feels nice and open. The other great thing as well is you do get those big tall windows on the side of the car. Remember I was saying about that in design. So that's excellent, you know, for making the kids, for not making the kids feel car sick. You know, they're not way down in this dark interior, you know, they can't see out of. There's good visibility, and they do sit in a slightly higher stadium style seating to the front seats. So even taller people like me, rather than children, you can see across the tops of the front seats. So it's very good in that sense. I can't complain about it, the size of the car. You do get door bins that they're not particularly big in terms of. My daughter, we were all out as a family yesterday in the car. So myself, my partner Liz, my daughter Katie and the dog, but Katie couldn't get her Yeti water bottle into the door bins. You know, they are just a bit small. So they'll take a plastic water bottle, but not the slightly larger metal ones like we've got. So that's maybe a downside. And there's no centre armrest either for additional storage. So there's a little bit of limitation when it comes to rear storage. You do get a mat pocket on the back of the passenger seat, but not one on the driver's seat, which is a bit disappointing. And you get a USB-A charging port on the back of the centre tunnel at the back there, but nothing else. There is obviously a raised transmission tunnel here because originally this car had a mechanical four-wheel drive system when the older models. So you've still got sort of like a raised, slightly raised floor there. So a third passenger would probably feel a little bit squashed in the back here. But for two, I don't think it's too bad. And as I say, I quite like the more upright sort of like style of the car, which gives it a more spacious feel to the back than probably you would get in a car of this class. So yeah, not bad at all. Now, a bit like sort of like the exterior of the car, you can see an older car in here in terms of its design that's been updated, you know, so there are changes that Jeep have made since 2014 to try and keep the car up to date. Has it worked? Not sure, if I'm honest with you. So the first thing to talk, so I'm just going to turn the fan speed down. Where are we? There we go. You've got this new touch screen here for the infotainment screen, which is not integrated like it used to be, obviously because it's slightly bigger now. I think it's about 10.5 inches, this Uconnect system, which does have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is very good. And in fairness, it's not actually that laggy at all. It's not bad. It's fairly quick to get to the things that you want to get to. The only thing I will say is the ADAS systems. So depending, obviously, if you are, you know, you're in your CarPlay mode, like, you know, like I am there, what you got to do is you got to go to the car setting there, and then you got to go down to safety and driving assistance, and then turn off traffic sign assist, go into lane sense, and then to turn that off as well. Although there is also a button down here to turn off your lane keep assist, but it's quite a lengthy process to do some of it. Do you know what I mean? So it does. There's a. I need to be careful what I say here. There's almost a little bit, it looks a little bit aftermarket. Do you know what I mean? The way that it's all here. But in fairness, it does work, and it works relatively well, depending obviously on what you want, you know? So I can't really sort of like criticize it too much. What I do like, however, and it is a little bit old fashioned because it's lifted out of my Grand Cherokee, which is 10 years old now as well. This climate control system here, now I like the fact that there's so many physical controls on the car, because the other thing is, think about this, okay? If you're getting in the car in winter time, you might be wearing gloves. The fact that you can turn the volume, the fan speed, the temperature, tune the radio, switch on the heated rear screen, switch on the full defrost, the front screen, whilst wearing gloves, because it's got big chunky switches, I really like that. I think that's a really good thing that they've kept. If that had been, I mean, yes, here, look, you've got your airflow distribution here, sort of like integrated into the screen. However, you can also just press the fan speed button in the middle of it. So you can do it by either pressing the screen, which obviously you couldn't do wearing gloves, but you've got the functionality to do it by pushing the central button of the fan, and that will change the airflow distribution as well. So I really do like that. That is something I think I'm really pleased that they've kept. And there's other things, you know, in terms of the physical buttons of the car, such as muting the radio, obviously hazards, switching the screen off, as I say, your lane keep assist is on there. The parking, sort of like functionality there, where the car will actually search for a parking bay. You can do that, and switching the parking sensors off. For instance, if you have a bike rack on the back, or you're towing a trailer, you can turn that off nice and easily. That I do like. The same with the four-wheel drive system button that's down here, and we'll talk about that a wee bit later. So, as I say, whilst that does look a tiny little bit of an afterthought in some respects, it has been updated, it has been modernised, it does have all the things that you want it to have. It's also got things such as Amazon Alexa, and as I say, the CarPlay and Android Auto. Whilst it's not as neatly integrated into the dashboard as it used to be, it is better, and I love the fact you've got these big physical switches down here. That is very, very good. And there's a chunky feel to the interior. Oh, the other thing as well is the light switch, which is up on the dashboard here, and again, it's the same. It's a big chunky rotary control, you know, just again, like same as my Grand Cherokee is. You can just turn it, you know, and the same with the fog lights. Every button in here you can work whilst wearing a pair of gloves. That's excellent. You know, as I say, I like that. You know, moving the buttons on the steering wheel, answering, hanging up on a call. None of it's touch sensitive. None of it's done through that. The only thing you really have to go into the screen for, as I say, is that ADAS system for the speed limit warning, and to switch on your heated seat and your heated steering wheel, if you've got those ones fitted to the car you're in. Other than that, there's a physical button for it. So that is good. It looks a little old-fashioned, but there's a reason, and it works, okay? What maybe isn't quite so good is this new digital instrumentation display. It's a 10.5-inch digital screen. In fairness, it's got all the information that you want on it. So you've got the speedo there, and you've got, but it's quite confusing because it seems to have a battery meter over on the right, and then it seems to show another one over on the left, and it's just not particular. You can configure it a little bit, but it's not that, still not that clear and that easy in some respects. So you can go from, where was it here? So you can change the layout of it if you want just a big central speedo there, but if you have anything else, then it puts the speed as a tiny little numeral right up at the top of the screen there. And there's no head-up display, you know, to counter that. So that's maybe the downside. So, you know, unless you want, if you want something other than the speed on the front of, in the middle of that dashboard there, as I say, if you move it to show you your media, for instance, on there, you got your Apple CarPlay on there, that relegates the speed to too far up on the dash. It's not quite as easy to read at a glance. And there's an awful lot going on in there. As I say, there's maybe just a bit too much information going on in there. But there we go. That's maybe the downside with it. Everything else is quite good. You know, the quality of the materials, this is the thing with Jeep. You know, they're never absolutely the best, you know, they're never right at the top of the game when it comes to quality materials, but they're far from the bottom. You know, so as I say, there's a lot to sort of like, so you get this soft sort of touch dashboard here as well, slightly harder plastics, you know, as you move further down, that maybe you're not going to touch that often. And as I say, the controls that these are here, they're ringed, so for the volume, the tuning, the fan speed, it's got a really nice soft grippy rubber ring round it, so when you're touching it, you know, it's a nice, and it's got a nice action as well to it. But then you get things such as the indicators. Now this is maybe just a pet peeve of mine. If you flick the indicator, you know, trying down, it feels quite plasticky and cheap. And I found occasionally at night when I was doing it, unless you do a real positive action, you end up flashing the main beam. So people were, you know, thinking, what am I flashing at? I'm not, I'm just putting the indicator on. But because it's not quite as robust, that's what I was finding I was doing. So when I was indicating, I would flash the main beam. So that's not quite as good. And this plastic around the steering column as well just feels a bit cheap and unfinished. There's some nice little bits, you know, sort of like round the car, you know, when you sort of like, as I said to you, in terms of the styling of it, you know, down on the speaker grills, you get the sort of like the face of the Wrangler, or the Willys Jeep. I keep saying Wrangler, I need to say Willys Jeep, because that's what it is. So the headlights and the 7-slot grille of the Willys Jeep there on the speaker grills. As I say, you get the little Willys Jeep climbing the windscreen there. That's quite nice. The other thing I really do like is down in the cup holders, believe it or not, which are shaped like the rear lights with a jerry can motif in them, and when you put your coffee flask into it, they've got rubber bungs down the side and it really grips them, so it stops that rattling around, which is excellent. You know, even my big Yeti one I had out yesterday, you know, you stick it down in there and it doesn't move around, doesn't rattle around. So if you're off-road, nothing's really kind of rattling. That's good. And if you are off-road, you've got this big grab handle there for the passenger, you know, and obviously you've got good sort of grab handles at the top there, which are nicely damped as well. Door handles are a tiny bit plasticky, but we'll forgive it for that. And as I say, they're just elements of it that you could just see slightly lower rent materials used lower down the cabin, but again, you can sort of forgive it a bit. The only thing I can't forgive in terms of is the size of the door bins. They're tiny, you know, they needed to be bigger, but they're only half size. But the rest of the storage isn't bad. So as well as having the 2 cup holders there, you've also got a slot down the side there that your mobile fits in just neatly. Now, you don't get a wireless charging pad, so that is a little bit antiquated. And there is a little bit of a tray down there, but it would be too small to put a wireless charging pad in. It's not deep enough. So you do have to rely on a good old-fashioned cable. But there is a little netted mat pocket just down the side of the transmission tunnel, so you could always drop a phone in there if you've got it plugged in there. And as I say, the CarPlay is wireless, so you don't have to worry too much about it. But yeah, if you want to charge, you've got to put it in there. This armrest moves slightly as well, so you've got, you know, a slight forward and back. Plus it lifts up, and it's deep, but it's not really well finished inside. It's just bare plastic in there. So your polements and your keys are going to rattle around a bit in there. Gear lever there, which is nice and straightforward. 6-speed transmission, 6-speed auto in this box. We'll talk about the drive line setup in the technical section next, and I'll give you the rundown on that. But yeah, it's okay. You get the little Willys Jeep thing on the top there at the back, but again, it's slightly hidden by this new frame, because you can see they've just basically stuck it over the top of where the old one was. But the face vents being up here are quite nice. You know, they're nice, they hit you in the face easily, and of course the same in the top 2 vents on there. It feels like the back in terms of it being really spacious, so when you're sat here as a driver, you know, the windscreen feels quite a bit in front of you. You know, this pillar here is quite upright, which obviously it is. So again, the car is quite easy to see out of and very easy to place. I was talking earlier about, you know, the styling with the slab sides. You get these big chunky door mirrors that you can see down the flanks of the car. You get blind spot monitoring as well. But because it is so square and sort of like slab sided, whether or not you're just navigating Sainsbury's car park or you're navigating a green lane, you know where the sides of the car. There's no big wheel arches that stick out over it. You know, there's no sort of, you know, you turn around, you look at the back window, that is the back of the car. So you know exactly where you can see the bonnet. Even a shorty like me knows exactly where the bonnet finishes. So that's really good, and you do sit quite upright in it. The steering wheel, this nice sort of like leather 3-spoke steering wheel with just the right amount of buttons on it. You know, you get media controls over on the left-hand side and your cruise control on the right. And the seats themselves, they're finished in this technical fabric. It's called a performance material on this Northstar. You can have leather if you go for the Summit. Personally, I wouldn't. I really like this. I think it's a really nice material. It's quite grippy. And the seat, whilst it's not, you know, got massive big bolsters on it, it's really comfortable. I did a really long drive in the car last week, and I have to admit, I didn't get out achy or tired or anything like that. So from that point of view, the seats are actually quite good. So I'd probably stick with this type of material. It's just quite a bit more rugged and a little bit more grippy. I like it. And the steering wheel itself, well, that adjusts for reach and for rake as well. So you can get a relatively decent driving position, although albeit all the controls are manual. So as I say, it's a bit of a mixed bag in the sense that, you know, it all works. And I'd say 90% of it is I like, you know, in terms of, but as I say, I do admit, I like my Grand Cherokee. I like the physical controls and stuff. I know that some people look at that and go, it's not particularly well designed, it's not particularly well integrated, and I understand that. but the fact that there is so much usability from it, and it's just nice and easy with muscle memory, your hand falls immediately to what you want to do. Volume, fan speed, turning up the temperature with very little to have to do through the screen. So from that point of view as an owner, it's nice and straightforward. But that could do with being better. There's an awful lot going on in there, and I don't think it's actually as configurable or as nice visually as what I get in my Grand Cherokee. That looks like a bit of an afterthought, but I have to admit it does work quite well. And as I say, it's relatively snappy to go through the various bits and pieces that you want, you know, for adjusting the settings of the car. You can set profiles up, you can schedule charging modes in it as well, you know, so if you've got cheap overnight electricity, you can schedule it all through here. As I say, there's Amazon Alexa as well with it, so there's an awful lot to commend it as well. So as I say, depending on your viewpoint, you'll either see it as a bit old and dated, or you'll look at it from an owner's point of view going, that's quite usable. Either way, it's not a bad interior. Now, there are two versions of the Renegade available in terms of its drivetrain. There's either the E-Hybrid, which is a normal hybrid, which uses a 1.5 litre engine driving just the front wheels, or you have the 4xe, which this one is, which along with a slightly smaller capacity 1.3 litre turbocharged engine driving the front wheels, it also has a 60 horsepower electric motor on the back axle, so no mechanical link between the two. And that provides 240 horsepower and 270 Newton meters of torque as a combined output, which on the face of it seems quite a lot. And Jeep say the car will accelerate to 60 miles an hour from rest in 7.5 seconds, which again sounds reasonably quick. The reality is slightly different, but we'll talk about that when we drive it. Now, the 4xe, what else is the setup here? Well, it's driven through a 6-speed automatic transmission. You get a dual clutch transmission on the E-Hybrid, but the 4xe uses an old sort of like school 6-speed automatic transmission. And that's a little bit of its downfall, but I'll save that for when we're driving it. It also has an 11.4 kilowatt hour battery. Now, you can charge that up from your standard 7 kilowatt wall box in roughly 2 hours. So, you know, you plug it in, and as I say, you can schedule the charging through the car as well. So if you get cheap overnight electricity, you can set it all up so that when the night time comes, the car starts to charge when it's plugged in. Nice and straightforward as well. And there are other things that you can do through the Jeep Uconnect app as well, which is quite good. Jeep say that the car will drive at probably up to around about 22 miles in electric driving on its own if you're out more on the open roads, and maybe as much as 35, 36 miles if it's just urban running around that you're doing. So again, that could be enough for a weekly commute. The problem is they turn around and say that as a combined MPG figure, it's around about 140 miles to the gallon. Don't take any notice of these figures. Now, I did a big drive in this car last week, and there's two faults that I have with it, that, you know, in terms of its mechanical setup. First of all, you'll struggle to get 40 miles to the gallon out of the car. Generally speaking, as an average MPG, that's what I was getting all this week I've had the car. About 38 MPG overall, using both battery and engine. The other thing is, because it has the battery and the electric motor in, the fuel tank is quite small. I filled this car up, the light came on that long journey, it said it had 40 miles of petrol left, petrol only range. So I stopped and filled it up. It took 40 quid to fill it up. That's it. My Grand Cherokee at 140 pounds is full. So actually its overall range that you get from the car is only about 280 miles, if that, which isn't a lot. That's the downside. So it's got quite a small petrol tank and quite a small battery. So do be aware of that. Right, enough of me blabbing, enough of the numbers. Shall we take it for a wee drive and see what we think? Come on then, let's do that. Now, as I said before, when you look at the power output of the car, the combined power output from the engine and the electric motor, 240 horsepower, in a small SUV, that sounds like a lot, you know, and also it's not 60 time, it's 7.5 seconds. Most people will tell you, oh, that's quite quick. And to most, you know, to most it is, that's fine. And it was funny because, you know, I spoke to a couple of sort of like contemporaries and, you know, other people who'd driven this car, and they sort of like said, yeah, it's you know, it feels quite sprightly. And I'm thinking, are we driving a different car? The thing is, it's quite quick when you first set off or at low speed, because what you've got is that torque, that instantaneous torque from the electric motor, which really pushes you forward. Now, even in hybrid mode, the car will obviously at lower speed, you know, or when you first set off, will set off in that electric power only mode, and obviously at higher speed it will then kick in with the engine. That's when things start to feel a little bit sluggish. So as I say, if you're pulling away from a junction, you know, a roundabout just there, or a set of traffic lights, your initial sort of like putting the foot down, yes, it does feel quite instantaneous. But it's when you extend that, it's when you get it up to speed, all of a sudden sort of like that in gear acceleration, as it would be, doesn't quite live up to the hype. It doesn't quite live up to sort of like what you were thinking when people are saying, oh, it's quite a quick car, and that number of 7.5 seconds suggests it's not. And I found that out last week when I was on the motorway. Now, I went to Coventry last week. I was sent to Coventry, and I took this car. You know, it was roughly 200 and something miles round trip, and I'd say 95% of it was motorway driving. And it did feel a little bit out of its depth on the motorway, I have to say that, you know. And it was times when you were going up the M40 and you maybe say pulling out to overtake, you know, a slower moving truck in this, you know, in lane 1, just getting up to speed past 60 miles an hour as you put your foot down, it's quite sluggish. It just doesn't feel quite as, you know, as get up and go as you'd want it to. Now, you can change that a little bit, because there is a plethora of driving modes that you have with the Renegade, and they're all activated by the button down here. So at the moment it's in hybrid, okay? You've then got two other modes. You've got electric and e-save. Okay, so electric is literally just driving it in electric mode, and e-save is, like I said, if you were like driving from here where I live out in Surrey, and you may be driving into central London or something, and you wanted to save the battery for when you got in there, you can program all that up, and then e-save will wait till the battery is needed, and then it will start to kick in and run on battery power. So that's just 3 modes you've got available to you. Then you've got different driving modes as well from this sort of like turn switch down here, this control knob, and that is the sort of like mostly the sort of like the 4-wheel drive system, which I'll talk about in a second. But if you go from auto, like I'm in at the moment, to sport, now when you put your foot down, it kicks down a bit quicker. Now, the problem there is the gearbox. This is the issue with this car. It's a 6-speed automatic, and dare I suggest it's quite dim-witted. It's never really sure what you're asking of it, okay? So, you know, there, like I was trying to kick down, and it didn't kick down immediately. All of a sudden it's like it's just woken up and it's going, what do you need me to do? Oh, right, okay. I don't know what gear I need to be in, and it just doesn't respond how you want it to. You know, it's like, oh, do I go down 2 gears? Oh no, maybe just the 1. And then when you need it, it's not there. And then when it don't need it, it sort of does it. So it's not as responsive to your right foot as it should be, as you do get with other automatic gearboxes. Now, as I say, you've got to have the 6-speed auto with the 4xe. You can't have it with the DCT transmission or a manual. It is purely and simply, this is it, one size fits all. And that is, as far as I'm led to believe, as far as I'm concerned, the majority of this car's problems. This gearbox is just too slow and dim-witted for this car, for it to be as responsive as you'd like it to be. Okay, so that's the drivetrain. Oh, and then from there, dare I suggest, you've then got your 4-wheel drive systems. So a bit like on my Jeep, you can go into snow, mud and sand as well, so the car will vary its torque depending on the surface it's on. You've also got a 4-wheel drive low range. You've also got hill descent control, and you've got an ability to lock the 4-wheel drive system in place. Okay, so that's all your different drive modes, which are all done down there. Okay, so that's that. Okay, moving on, the steering. Well, in a good way, the steering's quite light, which is excellent at low speed. You know, whether or not you're around town, whether or not you're off the beaten track. I have to suggest that the actual steering itself is actually very good. The fact that it's quite light, because it allows the car to be quite manoeuvrable, which is good. And because of its sort of relatively compact nature, as I was saying earlier, and the design of the car as well, it's a very easy car to place. So, you know, you're coming down some tight narrow lanes like I was on the other day. You know, you've got where my daughter now goes to school, there's some really tight country lanes, you know, they're very narrow lanes. This car's really nice and easy because you can see exactly where the sides are. So when you're going up against hedgerows and there's a big full fat Range Rover coming your other way, you know where you need to be. That's good. And then for parking at, you know, the railway station or Sainsbury's car park, the car is very easy to manoeuvre. The flip side is, however, at speed, the steering doesn't really weight up and it still feels quite vague at speed. So going into these corners, you've got a very sort of vague steering and a very soft suspension, which is great for off-road, but not so good when you flip it into a roundabout like this and you just, there's a huge amount of body lean and roll and stuff like that. Now look, it is an off-road car, okay? Let's not pretend that it is anything but that. It's not a crossover. It's not a, you know, a car that, you know, that takes kindly to being hustled down a back road. It is what it is. It's a small SUV, and dare I suggest, therefore, it behaves like one. So you have to drive the car the way it should be driven, in the same sense that you drive a Toyota Land Cruiser in the way it should be driven, or a Land Rover Defender in the way it should be driven, or a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon the way it should be driven. The Renegade's no different. So don't expect too much from it, and dare I suggest, it won't let you down. Suspension. Well, as I say, it is quite a soft suspension. It's on the car, which means the ride, well, it's okay. You know, it handles speed bumps, it handles imperfections on the road surface relatively well. You know, if you are taking off the beaten track, you know, I don't know, you like country walks at the weekend, you're in a National Trust car park where you've got some heavily pitted car parks, it's okay, and you've got reasonable suspension travel, which is quite nice. But just don't expect it to have a magic carpet ride. It's not crashy, it's just, you know, because there is so much wheel travel, that does sort of like then transmit that frequency into the car itself, so you do feel those bumps. The brakes aren't too bad actually. There's a relatively decent sort of like feel from the pedal, I have to say. So if I put my foot down now, it doesn't require much effort and it hauls the car up quite nicely. There is also a brake regeneration mode. So I press this button down by the brake lever here, the gear lever itself, and as I come off the brake pedal, you've got a maximum recuperation mode. It's just two modes, it's on or off, that's it. But you know, it gives you something. So yeah, that's the Renegade. It's just one of those cars that now feels its age. That's the problem with it, you know. And I am, you know, as I said, I'm constantly saying I do love Jeep as a brand, and I love their cars, and I've owned Jeeps. I've got a Jeep, you know, I love it. You know, it's a great car. It takes the family and I down to sort of like, you know, France every summer and Cornwall every Easter, and it's brilliant, and we do love it. But we understand that it's an old car now, and it, you know, it has its capabilities, and it won't drive like a, you know, like a Land Rover Discovery or a Volvo, the new Volvo XC90 or those type of cars. But there's a new Grand Cherokee out, okay? There is a new one, so that's that. The Renegade's still the Renegade. That's the problem. And whereas you can forgive it, you can forgive some of these older cars if they've got that sort of iconic nature with them. The G-Wagon, the Land Cruiser, the Wrangler. As I say, the Wrangler's a newer car, but it still looks like the old Jeep Wrangler. You're willing to forgive that. It's harder to forgive the Renegade because, as I say, the cars that are available in this class do this much, much better. And for those of you who need that off-road ability, do you need it as much to justify a car like this? Do you need it as much as as good as the Renegade will provide you with? If you do, then that's great. You can still buy this car, but you're going to have to put up with a lot more compromises. There's more compromises, dare I suggest, than there is plus points with the car. I hope that makes sense, what I've just said there. And that's what we're left with. You know, it is full of compromises, the Renegade. And, you know, there are some of us that, you know, will put up with those compromises, and we will put up with things like that to have a car like this. but I think we're very much in the minority. And I think, you know, with Jeep's move, especially as now part of Stellantis group, and with newer models desperately needed, then the Renegade really doesn't feel so much rebellious anymore. It's starting to feel a little bit like a Relic. Now, price. Okay, now you can get into a Renegade for £32,929, and that's the North Star in its front-wheel drive hybrid model, okay, just the e-hybrid. If you want the 4xe North Star, however, this model, that jumps quite a bit to £38,610. This car is fitted with a couple of options, one of which is the metallic green paint with the duo-tone finish. That takes it to a tenner under £40,000. And this isn't the top of the range model, remember. There's also the Summit, which you can't have as the 4xe, you can only have it as the e-hybrid. But even so, that's not exactly a cheap car, is it? The competition's an odd one as well, because, well, as I say, it's a bit of an oddball size of car. It's not a B segment SUV, but it's not quite a C segment SUV like the Compass is, or was, because it's going to be replaced. Anyway, as I say, in some respects, because of its size, it maybe rivals things such as the Renault Captur, the Nissan Juke, but it's probably a little bit bigger than those cars in terms of overall space and size. So maybe it's something like the Renault Symbioz or the Dacia Duster. That's probably quite a close rival for this car as well. Mazda with the CX-30. But even the Duster maybe doesn't quite have the sort of roughy-tufty off-road ability that this car has. So maybe you're going to look at another slightly quirky, oddball, difficult to pigeonhole style of car that's going to offer you that sort of off-road ability with electrified sort of like drivetrain running gear. And maybe you might see it as a rival for something like the Subaru Crosstrek. You get the impression that the Jeep Renegade is a little bit like one of those old rock bands that are still trying to plug new music and remain relevant against much younger and newer competition. And even us dyed-in-the-wool fans are the ones that are thinking maybe now retirement is the more dignified option for you. That being said, it does offer something still relatively unique in the marketplace, in as much that it's a small, compact, genuine off-roader that has plug-in hybrid ability. And if you need that capability of a Jeep with the electric ability of the modern age, then maybe this is still a car you'd consider. That being said, however, that is a very small market, and I think the majority of people are going to be better served by much newer, more technical, modern opposition that the Jeep faces. And as I say, even as dyed-in-the-wool Jeep fans are now thinking that maybe you're being less rebellious and you are just a little bit of a relic now, albeit a lovable one at that. Thank you for watching another road test review on House of Cars. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, give it a little thumbs up and do make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. And when you've done that, make sure you turn on your notifications so you don't miss the next one when it's up and loaded and gone live. And don't forget, of course, leave me your thoughts in the comment section down below. Are you a Renegade owner or a Jeep owner? What do you like about the brand? What do you like about your car? Would you consider it? If you haven't got one, would you consider it in this day and age? Let me know your thoughts down below. Now remember, I'm also on Instagram as well. If you're a fan of social media, you'll find me at House of Cars 1973. And remember, whether or not it is an old car or a new car, a small car or a large car, a slow car or a fast car, you'll find them all here in the House of Cars. Thanks again for watching. Thank you for your continued support. I'll see you again soon.